Back when I was like 19 or 20 years old, we had just gotten cable TV for the first time in my home. Prior to that, I had grown up with just 8 channels and I'd have to get up and twist it. But all of a sudden, we got like 150 new channels. And I went ballistic, consuming all the new media, the new content that came through the screen. And I remember seeing music videos for the first time. They had MTV and BET, and I got to see the Big Pimpin' video by Jay-Z. And I remember being so enthralled by the imagery on the screen. The guys just hanging out with all kinds of jewelry on. They're holding bottles of expensive wine and liquor. There are beautiful women everywhere. And they're on a yacht in a beautiful ocean somewhere, and in the backdrop there are mountains. And the whole video is sensational. It's exciting. It's titillating. Is that a real word? And I remember wanting that. I remember wanting to be Jay-Z in that video and wondering how I could get those things and what I would need to do in order to pursue and achieve all that coolness I seen on TV. And I even remember going back to school and studying a little bit harder for a little bit of time with my ADHD, with the desire to one day own a yacht. I was gonna have a bunch of beautiful women on it. And I remember one day my dad was a little upset with me because my report card wasn't so good. And I promised him, I said, Dad, I'm working hard. I'm gonna have a great life. I'm gonna do amazing things, Dad. You'll see one day I'm gonna buy a yacht. And my dad laughed at me. He laughed at me. He was like, okay, all right, yeah. And I took it personally. I took it like, I'll show him, right? It was sort of a mix between I'll show him, he doesn't think I can do it, I can make it happen. And I can't wait till I can give my dad this gift. But it was out of pride. It was fully out of pride, completely out of pride. Anyway, fast forward 20 years later, 25 years later, I had a conversion, or better yet, a reversion, and came back to Catholicism after, decades of falling away from the faith. And studying what monastics would do. I was really actually drawn to the faith through orthodoxy first. And I saw how these monks lived. And I was like, this is really cool. So there are these monks. They dress really cool, right? They wear like these hoods with a point. They're all in black and they got like these big crosses on them. And they live on a mountain in Greece called Mount Athos. And women aren't allowed there. Only men, only these monastic men, these men who've dedicated themselves to God. And the whole aesthetic is incredible. Of course, there's iconography, right? Icons. There's incense, right? So you'd see smoke. I'd watch see some videos and stuff. They have smoke and the chanting was just outrageous. Once again, very sensational, very titillating, very attractive to my soul. And I wanted that. Now, mind you, this is after having a wife and children and a career, a life. But I had this desire, this hunger for the extraordinary. I wanted something extraordinary. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't phrase it that way at the time. And I damn sure didn't when I was in college watching Big Pimpin'. I wasn't thinking, I hanker for an extraordinary life. I just saw something that stimulated my salivary glands and I wanted to go get it. Being completely unconscious of the process of how I got trapped in this desire. I was hypnotized by material things, both Big Pimpin' and on Mount Athos. Both very different things, very different ways of living, very different ideals, but both contain the same problem. And it's a very problem that I want to talk to you guys about here today. and refer to abandonment to divine providence as a source of eradicating or removing or waking up out of the sleep of the illusion of living some extraordinary life. The problem has been, in both cases, the problem was seeking my good in something outside me. That yacht, those pretty girls, the cool music, and the good times was going to give me a good life. And in a way, I kind of worshiped that because I was like, I'm going to go to work, right? Worship comes from the word worthship. And what are you worth? Well, the things that you value, you put effort into. So I kind of like worshiped it. All the while, there were responsibilities that I wasn't taking care of. I remember my dad used to get upset with me all the time because I didn't take out the garbage. I never made my bed, right? And my homework was shoddy at best. But I wanted this grandiose life. And the same thing with the desire for living on Mount Athos and living a holy life. It was like a holy ego life. And really allowing myself to daydream, fantasize about this extraordinary life while ignoring the very things that got me where I was that day. I remember at that time, I kind of took a break from YouTube, as I often do, ADHD dude, and was pursuing some sort of an extraordinary spiritual life, both of which were completely outside of reality. I'm living in fantasy, and I'm not seeing exactly what God wanted for me. Because when we're living in these fantasies, whether, bad or good, because whatever judgment you want to make of them, whenever we're living in these fantasies, whenever we're constructing these extraordinary, grandiose visions for ourselves, anytime we go out there looking for something magnificent to do, something big to do, something important to do, something that is very pleasing to the ego and makes people say, I'm awesome, I'm outside. I've missed. I've sinned. So today we're going to refer to section 2 in Abandonment to Divine Providence, where he talks about how the ordinary things in your life, the ordinary duties in your life, the ordinary circumstances that face you, sometimes boring, sometimes annoying, once in a while pleasurable, but always a shadow. That the ordinary things in our world, in fact, all of the things in our world, but in particular the ordinary things, are shadows giving an indication, pointing in a direction, helping us to see God's plan or your divine duty in the moment. And in other contexts, I've heard this idea given by an analogy. And so I've got kids, right? They're all grown now, but when they were really young, they used to play this game where, the bed is made, right? They come into my bedroom, the bed is made, my wife makes the bed. And they would sneak under the blanket and they would hide under there. They would hide under there, but I could see a big lump. So the kid thinks he's hiding, right? He's hiding. Just like in many instances, it seems like God is hiding. But there's a big lump. So underneath this blanket, which is analogous to the shadow of the material world, I can decipher somewhat clumsily what's going on underneath that blanket. Now, I know there's a kid under there, just like I can look out into the created world and I know there's a creator. And I don't know which kid that is. I don't know what the kid's wearing. I don't know what the kid's doing. I don't know what the kid's thinking. I don't know where the kid's going, but I can pay attention to that lump on the blanket. And if I, playing along with my child, pretend like I'm going to go lay down on the bed right on top of the lump, the kid scurries and runs away. And then you see the lump move. So in a way, that's analogous to us responding to the signposts, i.e. shadows in our world, as a means of uniting our will with the divine will, abandoning ourselves to divine providence. So I'm going to read briefly. These sections are really short, but I'm going to read just a sentence from the first paragraph, section 2, the duties of each moment. The duties, the attractions, and the crosses. Duties, attraction, and crosses. This is important, that are presented to us in every moment, each moment. These are, in fact, but shadows like those in nature, which act like a veil to cover sensible objects and hide them from us. Meaning there's a world underneath the blanket, and the world that we see is the blanket. We're focused on the blanket. We're focusing on lumps on the blanket. And what is being hidden from us is the divine action, but we can pay attention. Therefore, so here's what we do. Therefore, in the moral and supernatural order, the duties of each moment conceal under the semblance of dark shadows the truth of their divine character, which alone should rivet our attention. It's a mouthful. But in other words, what he's saying is that we get a glimpse, a very rough glimpse of God's plan, God's action, God's calling in your life every single moment. And it's right here concealed in the ordinariness of our life. Now, that is a far cry from what I've done as a youth and what maybe some of you are still doing, which is looking out at the landscape of some shadow that is so damn exciting that I'm going to dedicate my life to chasing that shadow. Boy, that's a beautiful looking shadow on Mount Athos. Now, I'm not denigrating Mount Athos at all. I'd still like to go visit, but it's material things, it's created things. It's not the thing itself. Just like big pimping on the yacht might bring feelings of excitement and joy, but it's not the real thing. It's not the real thing. It's a shadow. And chasing that shadow, and if you've ever chased a shadow, you know what shadows do once you catch them? They dissipate. They turn to be nothing. I've seen it. I've chased many shadows in my life. Got it and disappeared. Or got it and realized it's not what I wanted. Boy, there are so many things in my life that I chased to get and realized I don't want it because it was out of my own will, not God's. And there are things in my life that I did not ask for that have brought tremendous blessings into my life. That was a gift. I didn't have to do anything for it. So the shadows conceal God's work. The created world conceals God's plan for you. If you're ever not sure what to do, you ever have a situation where you're not sure which way to go, the best thing to do is to wait and see. And I know that goes against our sensibility. Our modern sensibility is seize the day, take the action, go and get it, make it happen. But once again, that's born out of the shadowiness of our minds and the illusions that we're chasing. God never puts it out there. He puts it right in front of you. And if you can't see it as plain as the lump under the blanket, that means you're too attached to an illusion because the truth is right in front of us. So I'll move on to part 2. So we established the metaphor according to Jean-Pierre de Caussade in my favorite book. We've wrapped up the analogy that the world is not so much an illusion, because it's real. I mean, we experience it as real. Quantum physics sort of tells us that it's not physical and we experience it different than what it actually is, but there's no question we're affected by and we affect it. We're open systems as human beings. So we can't ignore it. It is a part of us. It is important, but it is a lot less complicated than we think. So moving on to what I think is a great way for us to better understand the application of what this detachment, what this abandonment looks like in the life of the Holy Family. So, of course, Father Coussard is a Catholic priest, so he uses examples from the Bible, and I'll read straight from his book. There are remarkably few extraordinary characteristics in the outward events of the life of the Most Holy Virgin. At least there are none recorded in Scripture. So, as a Christian, we recognize that Mary is the vessel. She is the Ark of the Covenant. She is the portal through which Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, the man, the God-man, makes his way into the world. So for whatever it's worth, whether you're a Christian or you're not, the point is that this analogy helps you to understand that one of the greatest, most effective happenings, right, events that has ever happened on earth. I mean, Jesus Christ literally cut time in half. We're living in 2026 because it's 2026 years since Jesus, right? It's a pretty important thing, pretty important guy, right? And I don't care if you call it BCE or Common Era, all the kind of weird shit they call it today. The bottom line is we're living in the day of the Lord, right? You like it or not, it's what it is. How did somebody so important, so grandiose, so powerful choose to speak his word into the world? Well, through a very ordinary, boring little girl named Mary, Mama. Her exterior life is represented as very ordinary and simple. She did and suffered the same things that anyone in a similar state of life might do or suffer. She goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth as her other relatives did. She took shelter in a stable in a consequence of her poverty. All right, she didn't have a whole lot of money. She had to go and give birth to the God-man in a stable. She returned to Nazareth from whence she had been driven by persecution of Herod. She suffers persecution. She has to run. She's a refugee. She has to run around. She's got to like hide from the bad guys that are trying to get her. What a tough life. What a cross to bear, right? And it says she lived there with Joseph and Jesus, supporting them by the work of their own hands. Really boring guys. Joseph was a carpenter. Right? He drove nails into wood. It was in this way, though, that the Holy Family gained their daily bread. By what a divine nourishment Mary and Joseph received from this daily bread for the strengthening of their faith. It is like a sacrament to sanctify all of their moments. It is their perception, because we spoke about in the last video in section 1, that the very way that the ancients looked towards God is through abandonment. They didn't look for God in extraordinary circumstances and extraordinary events and mystical experiences. They looked for God in the daily bread. They looked for God in dragging the tiller, in driving the nails, right? In changing the diapers. Very basic things. It says, what treasures of grace lie concealed in these moments filled, apparently, by the most ordinary things. That which is visible might happen to anyone, but the invisible, discerned by faith, is no less than God operating very, very good things, very great things. So you can only see what I'm saying through the eyes of faith, because if you look out and you see the devastation in the world, you look at all the bad things happening, through the carnal eyes, you're going to judge and you're going to hate and you're going to sin, because you're doing exactly what God warned Adam in the garden. Do not eat from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, don't make up your mind about what's good and what's bad. You have no fucking clue what's good and what's bad. Let all things be. But that's our biggest issue. That's our biggest problem, is our own preferences. But he says those invisible things might happen to anybody, but the invisible discerned by the faith is no less than God operating very good things. O sacrament of the present moment, thou givest God under lowlier form as a manger, hay, or the straw. And to whom dost thou give? Finally, God reveals himself to the humble under the most lowly forms. But the proud, now check this out, because he's not just talking about Caesar, right? Pontius Pilate. He's not just talking about, kings, right? Donald Trump or, Putin, right? When God reveals himself to the humble under the most lowly form, but the proud, who he's talking about? Me. He's talking about you. He's talking about us. But the proud, attaching themselves entirely to that which is extrinsic, do not discover him hidden beneath and are sent away empty. Man, I think about my current situation, and I'll give you guys more details as things unfold, but you know how much I love this home. You know how long I've been here, 5 years, and I love this home. And I, in my pride, have attached myself to this extrinsic thing. Now, of course, I'm abandoned. I've been practicing abandonment. And I allow abandonment to carry this whole thing through, but it was because of my attachment that God taught me abandonment. This book was sitting on my shelf for years. And one day I was sitting in meditation, also carrying the pain in my heart that I knew that I was going to lose something I love. He just said to me, whispered in my, God doesn't talk, but he gives sense. There's divine action in the heart. And one day during my meditation, he said, abandon yourself to divine providence. Make my will yours. And I remember I had this book, so I went and looked at the book. The whole point in saying that God will give you those three things that I pointed out early. God will give you only these three things that I pointed out earlier. And it is only through these three things that we can discern our path in life or what to do in the next moment. The first of which is your duties for your state in life. If you are not taking care of what God has already given you, you're outside. Are you taking care of your wife? You're taking care of your children? Are you taking care of your home? Are you taking care of your health? Have you made your bed? Did you brush your teeth? Right? These are the things that God has given you. God has given us this body. I didn't make this body. I didn't create this body. I didn't ask for this body. I didn't make this body. It was a gift. If I'm not taking care of this body, then I am outside. I'm not fulfilling the very first obligation. The first obligation is take care of what's in front of you. Do what's in front of you. Take care of your surroundings. It doesn't need to be something 1,000 miles away, like these Christian missions who like to go to India and shit like that. It's like, there's homeless, hungry people right in your neighborhood. Look, there's one right there. But they like to go somewhere special. They want to go somewhere grandiose. They want to go do something extraordinary. Or somewhere in the future. Oh boy, when I get that thing, when I make that money, when I get that girl, when I finally become holy enough. Because we can bullshit ourselves either way, secular or religious. We could both. It's all based off the same lie that there's two powers and I am one of them. I'm a God. The second of which is divine attraction. And this is very subtle. These are the silent promptings that God is stirring in your heart to move you in a direction that he wants you to move in. Just like with the divine action that brought this book into my life. I didn't think about this book. God stirred something in my heart. God is stirring something in your heart. Problem is that, the soup that he's stirring has a whole bunch of shit in it too. Right? There's my own hopes, my own fears, my own dreams, all kinds of shit. And so the discernment process is actually, how can I get me out of here? And boy, I tell you, I love it. At this stage of my life, I want less and less of me. I want less and less of me. I must decrease so he can increase. I don't want me. I don't want my goals. I don't want my dreams. I don't want my preference. I want he. What he wants. For a myriad of different reasons, but that means I gotta listen. I get to listen. And I spend most of my days just listening. An old version of me used to spend most of my day behind that computer, trying to hustle and create and make and force and strive. Most of my day these days is just walking with my dogs, sitting on my chair, laying in my hammock, and making my daily video. So the simpler my life is, the less there is of me, the more there is of him to guide me. And he loves me more than I love myself, so I'll listen to him. That's number 2. And number 3, your cross. Pick up your cross and carry me. Meaning you're going to face crosses in this life. There's no question about it. By mere virtue of being here, there are crosses. And you felt the first cross when you were a baby, and you got spanked on the way out. Ow! Deal with it, kid. And when you have your last breath, you die. That's a cross. That's a cross to bear, and we'll all carry that cross. So whatever struggle, whatever challenge, whatever striving there is in your life, whatever problem there is in your life, look at it like that little kid under the blanket. Now, I don't look at the little kid under the blanket and say, I gotta fix this because the bed's all messy. I look at it and say, I wonder who's under there. I wonder what they're doing. Let me go and play around with it. I'm gonna tickle the bump. It's gonna move and it's gonna squirm. But never do I say, this is horrible, you're ruining my made bed, and start judging it, right? Curiosity and courage to carry the cross that God's given you every day, daily, multiple times throughout your life, multiple times throughout the day. God is asking us to obey. And the best way to obey is to do what you see and is important today. Done.